Welcome to another episode of Mindful Drawing. This is Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditative practice in the space of mindfulness and the act of drawing. This is episode 135, with a few supplemental technique-based things mixed in there. We've been doing this for almost 3 years now, producing about one episode per week, exploring different concepts, different ideas, whether they're at the meditative level or at the technique level of drawing, bringing them together using our breath to establish our space of awareness, using attention to the hands, to the fingers, to the body, to the subtle textures of the page or the instrument that you work with, pen, pencil, charcoal, anything that is your fancy for drawing and creating that visual expression on the page. That engagement with technique, that engagement with a space of mindfulness and awareness to that technique can be accessed at any level of ability, as long as you can move a hand around or something around that can make that mark on the page. You should be able to enter into any of these exercises and find your own way through them to creative expression, through relaxation, or just through a little bit of technique building, skill building, idea building. In this week's exercise, we'll meditate on that cycle of enclosure of the breath, expanding and then contracting inward. We'll do that through a series of concentric layered rings that give us a lot of room to move on the paper, a lot of room to bring attention to that directionality, to the motion, to where we start and where we stop. A lot of space for our hand to wobble, to bring some attention to that lever of drawing, holding the pen or pencil steady, finding evenness in the wrist, finding connection around the elbow, and holding that extension through the shoulder. Using that to practice a little bit mindfully the good technique of keeping the hand off the page, avoiding smudges and smears, but also as a place to enter synchronicity with the breath, to pay attention to the sensations that come through that pen or pencil from the page up through the chain into the body, to meditate on that full experience of engaging in an act of expression. I'm going to use a standard kind of pilot pen because it draws nice. I have a piece of Bristol taped to my table, but you can work with anything else you have handy to draw with: ballpoint, pencil, mechanical, and a sketchbook, a note card, a pad of paper, whatever works for you. Go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. So we'd work on a kind of centering meditation, working our way from out to in. We might find some visual reference or metaphor in them, but as an idea, it will just be a series of kind of concentrically building rings. And to do that, we'll draw some large, probably kind of slow and generally probably a little wobbly circles. So we might do a little practice warm-up on a sheet just to make sure the hand is feeling okay, moving in different directions, and touch on some points that might relate to the drawing. So anywhere on a piece of scrap, just making a circle of generally good size. And then it's okay if it wobbles, it has some gaps. I'm going to use a pen, I think, for the whole thing here. We'll draw several concentric circles. So now's the time to kind of get a sense of which way the hand wants to move, clockwise or counterclockwise. And that can switch up during the exercise with something we should bring into our attention and awareness. Another aspect may be where we start and stop. If we draw several circles around and around again, over and over, then we may begin to notice that subtle jumping place at the beginning and the end. So if we always start and stop roughly in the same place, we'll get a little bit of a bump or line working through it there. So something we may practice, entirely up to you, is varying the start location for every kind of concentric motion that we make, so that it gets spread out and can become the initiation or generator of a second phase to the drawing. But this kind of oniony ring system will be our primary place of engagement for the bulk of the exercise. Just a few more circles, feeling out that movement in both directions, maybe even just parts of curves, just to get the hand and arm working together. See if you can have the palm of the hand a little off the paper for the drawing. That way we don't smear or smudge, but we may end up with slightly funnier looking circles, as that can be more challenging to control. And I think I'll begin to transition to a larger sheet, a fresh sheet. Get familiar with its territory, maybe move both hands, the drawing hand and the offhand, around its perimeter. Feel out the extension of your reach just by going around, slowly moving from the page's rectangle into a more circular position, noticing if there's any tightness in the back or the shoulders. My shoulder's a bit tight, feeling a cross is challenging. That may make more wobble over there. If there is any tightness there, we can take just a couple of deep breaths to feel into that shoulder girdle, upper back, and fill out some space as we breathe in. Maybe let the arms come up and back a little bit, let the shoulders expand. Obviously exhale as you need. A couple of cycles in. And give the upper back and shoulders a little rotation. And maybe just roll the shoulders up, back, down, forward, up, back, down, forward a couple of times. And the other way a couple of times. Making sure that longer lever arm is engaged and just has a little blood flow to keep it active. And then we'll enter into that space of the page, the openness, with a fairly large circle, not all the way to the edge. Considering where to begin, establishing with a breath and starting the journey around. And it may not be a circle, but a round enclosing shape, large and encompassing of space, setting off the inside and the outside. And depending on what intentions you want to set to keep in your mind, I think a good exercise could be alternating direction, if that's comfortable, and changing starting positions so that with each re-engagement we set some of that intention, use the cycle of the breath to establish position, direction, and the exhalation to begin moving in a generally tight, fairly close, maybe somewhat slow at first, inner ring, trying to track along that first circle. But it's okay if things wobble and deviate a little, as we'll come back later as places of interest or engagement. Breathing in again to set that place, direction, and intention, and begin with the exhalation, tracking another ring inward, perhaps picking up some of the wobbles, perhaps the hand or that long extension of the arm, or the places where it's harder to see, introducing their own new shapes. That long journey around, a chance for observation. You can kind of pick up a bit of your own pace, breathing in to start a new ring, and exhaling along the journey as you observe where you can see, where there may be discomfort or just a feeling of uncertainty when the pen or hand hide the line. We have to trust and guide. Just let the arm flow. If it crosses a ring, that's fine. If one direction feels more comfortable to draw, gives you more space to engage in the action, and follow that. Or keep alternating clockwise and counterclockwise. Alternating, jumping, starting positions. The breath in to establish, and we can always take a couple of them as a point of rest or recentering as we work this large territory inward on that long path, noticing the speed. Do you feel that you're moving fast or slow, smooth or jittery? Any of them are fine. They just contribute something of character at this point to the drawing. And they offer us an entrance into that series of sensations, tactile, visual, maybe even auditory, to the drawing experience, the texture of the page, the engagement of the muscles of the hand, the softness or suppleness of how the fingers hold the pen or pencil, the engagement of the wrist and the forearm to keep things moving kind of smooth and clean, holding the arm above the page, the elbow, keeping the lever extended. Remembering to breathe in between cycles, to not get too caught up in the observation, but to use each one as a new reset. Each one can observe the same thing, working its way from the fingertips to the shoulder, scanning up the chain and down the chain. Are there any places of tension? Maybe giving them a moment with a breath in between, just to let them know it's okay to loosen up, support. If it helps to rest the pinky finger now and then, the long space in between, giving time for the ink to dry, or careful attention of the placement, avoiding any graphite, or just letting smears or smudges become part of the page. But when you can, with that attention on the fingers, the wrist, the forearm, the elbow, the shoulder, that whole chain of extension from our core down through the tip of the pen or pencil, engaged, active, part mechanical, all those joints finding position, subtly aligning and realigning as you move in this broad, encompassing shape. But with any practice, you can find fatigue, and the breath can be our replenishing there. Taking a pause between rings, Even switching hands, if that feels doable for you, might introduce a little more wobble, but can bring rest and a new sensation for that mind to track. As the rings get smaller, depending on the size of your page, if things are beginning to get tight, it may be a good opportunity with a little bit less travel distance each time to really follow along that curve with the breath. Wherever you are, testing it out on the next few of following the pattern of inhaling to find position and direction, and try to track the exhalation as far as it continues along that trajectory, noticing the speed, and trying again on the next one. Keeping presence with that full relaxing out breath, the full replenishing in breath. Perhaps a slight speeding up of the hand to match your exhalation cycle. Perhaps a slowing of the breath to match the speed of your hand, somewhere in between, finding balance. Coming to a place where that exhalation can travel all the way around the circle. And if you run out of room, if yours is not as large as the starting position, you may be able to work outward. But as an introduction to the next phase, in case anyone reaches there, we can use the platform we've begun to establish through this cycle of breath to add anomalies, new moments, perhaps at these places where we begin and end, just introducing little bumps, little gaps, taking advantage of something that emerges visually from our mindful attention and process, becomes something else in those rings. Just introduce it now in case you're on that place. I'm going to continue aligning breath with motion, and maybe take a few quiet minutes to either observe and find places of entrance into the drawing, to really sink down into that breath cycling around the whole page. If you want to explore that, but yours has filled in quite a bit, you can turn the page over, put a new sheet down, and just start again, working from out to in with that mindful awareness of location, direction, and speed of breath and motion. As I gradually approach the inner rings, that breath, alignment, attuned to my motion, adjustable for speed and space, distance over time. The last few closing ones, completing the filling in, completing that mindful entrance into the connection between action, the breath, expression visually out here on the page, the drawing component, opening up a lot of possibility in the territory as I move back to looking for these places to add a little bump, maybe a little infill, little retracing. Maybe the eyes begin to notice or recognize something in the shape. A slice through an onion, a cabbage, the rings of a tree. Perhaps that recognizing guides our engagement, things we remember in the mind's eye, finding new presence on the paper. Using that visual connection to the page, the calm and present observation to enter the drawing through points of interest, things that we are drawn to, open and accessible without thinking, without worrying what they may create, just trusting what the eyes see and the technique or system that the hand engages with. From the many, something of nature, the repetition of expression, any individual moment is unique, local to its context, but also part of many moments. So one a little different, but kind of the same, becomes part of the whole. Small jitters, subtle airs in technique or motion can become integrated, become part of the new, the character of the expression, of the exploration, the little things that make a thing special. Give it space to perhaps communicate or inspire or just capture curiosity. Finding through a practice of mindfulness, of connecting and then releasing, a way to unthink the complexity of an idea, to be open to exploring a territory, whether of thought, of a problem, or just a piece of paper with a pen or pencil. Through time, through mindful access, presence, and attention, we come to know the space, to know something of ourself in the engagement, coming together with that space. To perhaps find new expression, new creative potential in any problem, here on the page, at work, while cooking, maybe just an idea of things to notice around. The more we take in with attention, the more builds in that internal repertoire of potential visual things, the way they work in the world, the way we see them. There's so much territory to explore. This could be a place for spending the day, just finding new little bumps. But in the absence of that whole day, we have 4 or 5 minutes. Just draw together and internally in this space. Maybe exploring the shading, the connections between rings, the opening or filling of territories, and see where it goes for a couple of minutes. Before we get maybe too lost in that space, though if you have the time and the desire, then stay lost in that space for a little while. But some we may have to go, we can begin to bring ourselves out, to resist a little bit of that urge to keep filling in, to bring the pen or pencil to rest with a bit of intention, whether that's replacing the cap, or just very deliberately setting it down, noticing the way it sits and the sound it may make, noticing the change in feeling after holding it for a while in the hand, wiggling that around to feel the changes in the tension of the muscles and the tissue, and then taking a couple of deep breaths to come back into the space, filling out the lungs, expanding and then releasing. One more, letting that head and neck extend upwards, pulled from the crown. And then letting the vertebrae sink back in, reestablishing the posture after maybe leaning over on the page. A couple little movements just to feel where things are. The eyes come back into focus. Prepare to enter the rest of the day. Coming back from the drawing, we may all have our own visual metaphors emerging there from what is a fairly natural phenomenon, the concentric rings that may form the trunk of a tree sliced through the stem of a plant, an onion, a cabbage, or anything else you recognize from your internal catalog of visual references, images collected over time, reprojected to enter into a space of a drawing, and find something novel, something unique to you, something expressed through your action, through the movements of your arm, through that interface, the medium, a paper, a pencil, a pen, to find your creative voice for a few minutes there. Time you've given to yourself to explore, to decompress, to create, and then to let go, move away, and continue on, knowing you can come back at any time to this drawing or take the same techniques into a few minutes here or there to just align with the breath, to establish rhythm, and to be prepared to navigate uncertainty, anomaly, and the challenges that come with any day. I thank you all for joining. I hope everyone's having a wonderful holiday season, making it through and finding some time to connect with the self, with others, and maybe do a few mindful drawing exercises in between to balance that time out. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know what you discovered or what you see in your own drawing. And you can find new videos here, usually every Wednesday. Some weeks I get a little behind, so it pops up on Thursday or Friday. But there's new ones coming each week for you to explore new ways into expression, new paths to mindfulness through the act of drawing. Hope you have a wonderful day. Draw well. Thank you.